And welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm joined by Adam MacLeod. He is professor of law at St. Mary's University, but that's coming to an end. I've just received some tremendously good news. An unfortunate loss to St. Mary's, of course, but a blessing to those in D.C., and I'll let him share this. He's joining us to talk about a Christian vision of a free government. Adam, so great to speak with you. How are you?
Thanks for having me back. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm doing well. Thanks.
So, you want to share the good news with everyone?
Sure, yes. Well, as of this week, I am no longer at St. Mary's University in Texas. I'm now at the Catholic University of America. I will be teaching law and legal philosophy in the Columbus School of Law, and then also doing a lot of scholarship and public intellectual work with the Center for Law and the Human Person there at CUA. There's a lot of great, exciting things happening at CUA. I'm really delighted to be part of it.
I'm very, very happy for CUA, and you're going to be such a treasure there. Adding to their already embarrassing wealth of riches, I might add intellectually. So let's begin. Sorry. You and I were talking just before this interview about the unfortunate rise, even within the Catholic sphere, of post-liberal, integralists, an overt push for theocracy, theonomy. I just threw out some big words, Adam. For the sake of our listeners, I wonder if you could just share what these words mean and what is the contention being put forth here?
Yeah. Well, there are a number of different contentions because there's a number of different factions within this movement. You've got your common good constitutionalists who are being led by Professor Adrian Vermeule at Harvard. You've got your post-liberal academics such as Pat Deneen. You've got your full-on integralists. And there's some interesting differences amongst these various groups. But what they all have in common is fundamentally this. They believe that the power of the state should be unified rather than divided, which is directly antithetical to at least the American experiment in constitutional governments, where we separate powers amongst the branches of government and where we separate powers at different levels within our federal government.
Which is the inherent brilliance of the check and balance of powers.
Right, and predicated on the understanding that humans are sinful, that power corrupts. Here we are at the Acton Institute event. We have to quote Lord Acton. So, and then the second element is that this unified government power should be brought under the authority of, well, take your pick. For the Roman Catholic flavors, it would be the church. For more Reformed Protestant flavors, it would be some form of Christian nationalism that's sort of grounded in scriptural authority. But that's fundamentally the gist that all of these different groups are pushing for. And this has a number of very significant implications. One of the implications, which we've just touched on, is the consolidation of political power. And that's, in my judgment, a very bad idea. Another implication is you're going to have to eradicate a number of fundamental civil and political liberties.
Yes.
You're going to have, one of the slogans of some of these folks is that error has no rights. We should not tolerate differences of religious opinion or political opinion or views about law and policy. We should just suppress those who hold views that, in our enlightened judgment, are wrong.
In other words, legislate religious morality.
Precisely. So we have to get rid of the First Amendment. We have to get rid of property rights.
That's
we have to get rid of all of these rights of political, civil liberty, and private ordering, which enable people to disagree, to live in a pluralistic society. And these in my judgment, that's almost even more insidious and dangerous than the proposal to consolidate government power.
You'd have to, like you rightly mentioned, the First Amendment and the way it's constructed, and thereby, because of the separation of powers in the United States, allows for a legitimate expression of freedom of religion, unlike anything that exists outside of the United States. Even in nations that are supposedly, on paper, constitutionally free. And the entire reason this works is because it is hinged upon a premise of a limitation of government and the liberty of the individual. The individuals who push for this, all these words we threw out, but really what they want is a unified, strong, and frankly, I dare say, authoritarian government. The individuals who push for that have no qualms relinquishing that right in the process. Can you share with us why, from a Catholic perspective, that can be problematic?
Well, it's problematic from a Catholic perspective because the official doctrine of the Church, as I understand it, is in favor of religious liberty. Clearly since Vatican II. But
we have a whole document on it.
Precisely. So it's directly contrary to the Church's clear teaching on this. From a broader perspective, what you might call a philosophical perspective, I think the Roman Catholic teaching is correct, substantively correct. That is to say that religious liberty is an affirmative good. Mm-hmm. It's something to be preserved. It's something to be preserved for its own sake. Mm-hmm. At the level of the individual human person, it is a constitutive, important, essential aspect of human flourishing, that people be free to choose friendship with God for its own sake, that they not be coerced. You cannot coerce friendship. Yeah. You can't coerce friendship with another human being. No more can you coerce friendship with God. You cannot coerce people into true, genuine religious belief. And then at the institutional level, let's just stipulate, for the sake of argument, that the Roman Catholic Church has a monopoly on religious truth. Even if that's the case, it's important for the Church and for the state to recognize the liberty of other religious institutions, insofar as you're not, frankly, going to convert everybody. And we ought to want people to pursue genuine expressions of religious exercise, even if those religious expressions are imperfect in ways that we can identify, because they're better off doing that than living without religious exercise.
Yes.
Religion by itself is valuable and good, even when it has errors in it. People are better off seeking meaning in their lives, seeking the truths about our creation and our nature, and we do not want them to be enslaved to the various deterministic philosophies, which are the alternative. You don't want people trapped in naturalism and Hegelian determinism and all these other ideologies. Or transhumanism.
Right, or Rousseau and self-expression. It can go on and on.
All these various errors are actually much worse than even important religious errors.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, because you brought that up, the other point that we can also, we by necessity have to concede, is that freedom of religion, and therefore a true liberty in religious expression, is still infinitely better than a coerced ascribing to, in this case, let's say it's the Catholic Church, a coerced ascribing of faith to the Church.
Yes, I concur 100%. Also, look at all the other goods that we get out of religious freedom. Look at all the good things that religious communities do, whether it's hospitals, nonprofit and charitable work, feeding the poor and the homeless. One of the beneficial side effects to, say, church youth group mission trips to wherever, India or El Salvador, is the educational effect that it has on the teenagers who are taken on these trips, to give them a sense of deep gratitude for what they... There are so many good things that religious institutions and religious communities do. Yeah. So we ought to protect religious liberty for its own sake, and we ought to protect it for all of the other goods that it produces. And then finally, we ought to protect it because it's the just thing to do. It is just not right to coerce belief in another human being. Every human being is
It should be put on a plaque.
There are expressions of this more succinct than the one I just gave you. I mean, look at, Madison's letter on toleration. Look at John Locke on toleration. So many great expressions of this in our Western tradition. But the important principle underneath this is one that we as Christians can affirm. Every human being is made in the image of God. And at its essence, what that means is that every single one of us is an embodied, rational, spirited soul. And the rational aspect is important.
The rational aspect is important, and we're going to pause on that cliffhanger. I'm talking with Adam MacLeod. He's a professor of law now at the Catholic University of America, and he's going to participate in a whole host of events and institutes there. And we're continuing on the other side. I'm going to take a short break to talk about the Christian vision of a free government. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter. And welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter talking with Adam MacLeod, Professor of Law at Catholic University of America, as of the time of this shooting this week.
That's right.
So, like you were mentioning, God designed the human person with this inherent, by virtue of being a bearer of the divine image,
Yes.
we have this inherent capacity for reason.
Yes.
And the exercise of that reason also entails the exercise of one's conscience being formed and the pursuit of one's conscience in free will.
Yes, absolutely. And so the exercise of free will toward what we understand to be good, understand by our reason to be good, is an essential aspect of what it means to be human, and it's an essential aspect of what it means to be made in the image of God. To coerce someone to affirm what they have not been persuaded in their reason is true. To coerce someone to accept, say, a set of religious dogmas is to violate their dignity. It is to fail to respect that person as a fellow being in the Imago Dei. And so this is the reason in justice why we should respect religious liberty, in addition to all those other reasons that we discussed earlier. Yeah.
Now, precisely because of this, I also want to make clear, just so that our listeners understand and our viewers understand, that what you're sharing right now is not some novel fruit that came about as the result of the great experiment of United States republicanism. This really is a heritage that can go as far back as the book of Deuteronomy, and you trace it all the way forward. School of Salamanca, but Augustinian, Thomistic thought. So just help us understand that this really is the Christian vision of what a free government and therefore a free populace can look like.
It absolutely is, and it's one on which Christians of various denominations ought to be able to agree. Mm-hmm. And they ought to be able to agree to this because though Christianity is the religion which has given us the sharpest, most persuasive expressions of this teaching, the teaching itself is not Christian per se. Mm-hmm. We do not have a monopoly on this truth. It's true. And rational minds can grasp these truths about
and
the
reason
human person
to it.
And about conscience. That's right. This is the whole teaching that we're so fond of hearing here at Acton University about natural law. That there are certain principles which are evident to all of us just as human beings. And from those principles we can work out not answers to every practical question that we have, but many of them. Many of the most important and fundamental practical, ethical, legal, political questions in our society are resolved by these principles of natural law, and we can reason together about them. And this tradition has long affirmed that friendship with God, friendship with other fellow human beings cannot be coerced, that these are goods which can only be freely chosen by the person participating in them.
Some people listening right now might be thinking, well, what's so wrong with that coercion if it guarantees the salvation of the soul?
Well, then we have to have a question about what constitutes salvation of the soul. And it seems to me that the Church rightly teaches that the salvation of the soul itself must be accepted by the person who's being saved. I suppose you can administer certain sacraments to someone involuntarily, and I'm not competent to weigh in on whether that's effective. But certainly the propositions themselves of the faith, acknowledging the supremacy of God over my life, submitting to His will because I believe that He is good and that He is the author of all goodness. Those are things that cannot be coerced. Yeah. And to the extent that that's an essential aspect of the salvation of the soul, that can't be forced on someone externally.
And therefore, what you're raising here is that crucial language of the grammar of assent when it comes to both belief in God and therefore the way in which one lives in a populace as one being governed.
I think that's right. So there are important implications of this for our political communities. A rightly ordered political community ought to refrain from coercion in matters of conscience. Now, of course, there are boundaries to this. No conscientious person can believe that it is just and right to commit murder, say. Mm-hmm. So, of course, we're not violating anyone's rights of conscience when we prohibit, say, child sacrifice, mutilation. There are certain wrongs that are wrong again, as a matter of natural law and natural reason, and that everybody knows these things to be wrong. And so they're just outside the realm of conscientious behavior that we ought to respect. But apart from those, it is, in fact, I think, a principle of political justice that we ought to respect the freedom of people to obey their conscience in matters of religion, just as in matters of ethics and politics.
You keep bringing up this concept of natural law, and Aquinas is one of the clearest enumerators of it. He talks about the natural law as nothing more than the rational creature's participation in the Creator's mind for his material creation. In other words, there are these things of natural law that are completely universal, that you and I are not standing against.
Yep. That's right.
It's effectively that there are certain things within the concept of natural law that allow for human volition.
Oh, no question. And, Aquinas himself is quite suspicious of using the coercive powers of government and law, not just for conscientious or religious assent to religious truths, but for human flourishing and virtue generally. He says in, for example, the Treatise on Law within the Summa, that if the law gets too far out ahead of the virtue of the people and tries to coerce certain virtuous acts or tries to prohibit certain vicious acts that the people are not ready to assent to, it can actually cause a backlash.
Yes.
That can actually be counterproductive. Again, this is reflecting a deeply true teaching that Aquinas himself affirms in many places in the Summa and elsewhere, that human beings are complex, but that all the various aspects of our personhood are interdependent. That my will and my reason and my body and my inspirited self we should not force people to tear those apart. We should not cause violence to the various aspects of a human being. We should not coerce them bodily to do something that they've not understood with their mind and freely chosen to believe as true. And that's an important principle of natural justice as well.
For someone who hasn't spent enough time thinking about these issues, Adam, I think I want to ask you to also speak to why a Catholic most probably doesn't want a theocracy. We really shouldn't. That's not the ideal we should be striving for here. This kingdom is not our world.
Yeah.
This world's not our kingdom.
Well, I myself am actually an Anglican. I'm probably one of the more Catholic Anglicans you'll meet. But, I think if I were Catholic, I would refer back to a moment in American history that's not that long ago, actually, the beginning of the 20th century, when anti-Catholic sentiment was running very, very high. Mm-hmm. And a lot of anti-Catholics got a lot of laws passed and even some state constitutional provisions prohibiting Catholics from holding office, prohibiting Catholic institutions from receiving public funds, and placing various other legal disabilities on Roman Catholics and Roman Catholic institutions. So I would think that Roman Catholics of all people would be in favor of religious liberty and affirm that those were unjust laws.
Yeah.
Not because they were directed at Catholics, but because they were directed at religious expression.
Right.
So if you really believe that the force of government should be used to enforce religious dogmas, well, you must have a lot of confidence that the government's always going to be run by conscientious Roman Catholics.
Right, and virtuous ones at that.
And virtuous ones at that, and that seems unlikely to me. Yeah.
Well, Adam, I really enjoyed this. Thank you very much for your time. How can people find out more about your work?
Well, they can look me up at Catholic University of America's website. Keep an eye on a number of really exciting initiatives we've got coming down the pike at the Center for Law and the Human Person at Catholic University of America.
My guest has been Adam MacLeod. He is Professor of Law at Catholic University of America. He's wearing quite a few hats there, including in its Center for Law and
the Human Person.
The Human Person. And we've been talking effectively about a Christian vision of a free government, and very clearly enumerating that in light of Catholic doctrine, to understand that what we want is a virtuous government that will be able to be held to account without the coercion of a theocratic, theonomic ideal. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.